The baby was screaming again. Not the soft, tired cry of a child who wanted milk or a nap or someone to hold her. This was something else. Something that came from deep inside a 2-year-old girl who had already learned that some things could not be fixed, and some people could not be trusted, and some kinds of quiet were worse than noise. Nanny number 7 stood in the hallway of the Castellano estate with her coat already on and her bag already packed. She had lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. That was 3 hours and 49 minutes longer than Nanny number 6. She handed the resignation letter to Owen Price, the estate's head of staff, and she did not look back as she walked to the door. She was a good woman. She had a degree from a respected university, 12 years of experience with difficult children, and 3 glowing references. None of that had helped. None of that ever helped in this house. Owen stood in the hallway and listened to the child scream and thought, very quietly, that he was running out of options. The man who owned this estate, who owned most things in this part of the city if you looked carefully enough at the paperwork, was named Dante Castellano. He was 41 years old. He was not a tall man, but he had the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller when he entered them. He spoke 4 languages and smiled rarely and had never, in Owen's 20 years of working for him, once raised his voice. He did not need to. Dante Castellano had built his life on a single, clean principle. Every problem had a solution. You found the right person, applied the right pressure, offered the right number, and the problem dissolved. It was simple. It was reliable. It had never failed him. Until Sira. Sira was his daughter. She was 2 years and 3 months old. She had her mother's eyes, dark and wide, and her father's jaw, set and stubborn even in sleep. She had come into the world in a burst of chaos and joy, and she had been handed from one pair of arms to another for the past 8 months, ever since the morning her mother did not wake up. Dante had not spoken of his wife's death to anyone. Not to Owen, not to his closest associates, not to the grief counselor Owen had quietly arranged, and Dante had quietly dismissed after one session. He had arranged the funeral, handled every detail with the same efficiency he applied to everything, and returned to work the following Monday. But something in Sira had understood what he would not say out loud. Children know. They feel the shape of absence even before they have words for it, and Sira had decided, somewhere in the wordless logic of her grief, that she would not trust easily again, that the next person who tried to hold her might also disappear. That screaming was safer than hoping. 7 nannies in 4 months. The first had been a woman named Caroline Webb, 53 years old, gentle-voiced, experienced with grieving children. Sira had tolerated her for 11 days before the screaming started. Caroline had given it 3 weeks and then written a kind note and left. The second was a young man named Patrick Hale, recommended by a child psychologist who said sometimes children responded better to male caregivers after losing a mother. Sira looked at him the way you look at a wall. Not hostility, not sadness, just absence. He lasted 9 days. The third, the fourth, and the fifth had blurred together in Owen's memory into one long headache of agency calls and credential checks and hopeful introductions that ended in the same way. Sira would be silent during the introduction, watchful, and then the moment the new nanny reached for her, something would break open in the child's chest and the screaming would begin. Nanny number 6 had lasted 2 hours and 22 minutes. She was not a weak woman. She had worked with traumatized children in a hospital setting for 6 years. She sat on the floor outside Sira's room afterward and cried quietly to herself, not because she had failed, but because she understood exactly why she had failed and there was nothing she could have done differently. And now number 7 was walking down the front steps with her bag and her coat and her quiet devastation, and Owen was standing in the hallway, and the child was still screaming upstairs, and somewhere on the 3rd floor, behind a closed door, Dante Castellano was on a call with someone in another country who owed him money, and he was speaking in a perfectly level voice, as if nothing in this house was happening at all. Owen went upstairs. He opened Sierra's door. She was sitting in the middle of the floor, which was covered in soft rugs and low shelves of toys and picture books, all of it arranged by a child development consultant who had charged an enormous amount of money to make the room feel safe. Sierra was not looking at any of it. She was looking at the door. Her face was red. Her screaming had stopped the moment the door opened, replaced by the specific, devastating silence of a child who has worn herself out. Owen sat on the floor across from her. He was a 60-year-old man with bad knees and a formal suit, and absolutely no training with children, and he sat on the floor because it was the only thing he could think to do. Sierra looked at him. He looked back. "Right," he said, "it is just the two of us again." She blinked. "I have no idea what to do," he told her honestly. She picked up a small wooden block from the floor beside her and held it out to him. He took it. She picked up another one and held it against her chest. They sat like that for a while. Owen thought about the list of nannies still in his desk drawer, the ones the agency had suggested as next possibilities. He thought about the child psychologist's recommendation to try a different approach. He thought about Dante's face when Owen had knocked on his office door after nanny number 5 left, the way Dante had listened without expression and then said, "Find someone else," and gone back to his papers. He thought about the fact that the answer, if there was one, was not going to come from a list. He set the wooden block carefully on the floor between them. Sierra looked at it. Then she looked at him. Then she reached over, picked it up again, and put it back in his hand. He closed his fingers around it. Downstairs, the front door had closed behind nanny number 7. The house had settled into its particular, heavy quiet, the kind of quiet that filled rooms when grief had been living in them long enough to unpack. Owen stayed on the floor until Sierra fell asleep. Then he got up, very carefully with his bad knees, and went to find a solution he did not yet know existed. She was already in the house. He just did not know it yet. Her name was Rosa Vittle. She had been cleaning the East Wing every morning for 2 months. She arrived before 5 and left before the household woke, and in 20 years of managing this estate, Owen had never once learned her last name. She was part of the agency contract, a line item, a pair of hands that kept the floors clean and the surfaces dust-free and left no trace of herself behind except the faint smell of cleaning solution and the shine on the tiles. She was 26 years old. She had been working since she was 15. She had grown up in a narrow apartment above a bakery in a neighborhood where nobody had very much, and everyone looked out for each other anyway, because that was the only option available. She was not a remarkable-looking person. She was not unremarkable either. She had dark hair she kept pinned back when she worked and brown eyes that paid close attention and hands that were permanently dry from the cleaning products, no matter how much lotion she used. She talked to herself when she worked, not loudly. A low, steady murmur in the dialect her grandmother had spoken, narrating her tasks, arguing with stubborn stains, passing quiet judgment on the state of the grout. She had no idea that a 2-year-old girl had been tearing through nannies like paper for the past 4 months. She had no idea that anything was wrong in this house at all, because the people she worked for kept their problems behind closed doors, and Rosa was very good at not looking at closed doors. She would find out soon enough. Not because anyone told her. Because Sierra found her first. It was a Thursday morning. It was not yet 6. Rosa was on her knees in the kitchen, working on a section of floor near the cabinet under the sink that never seemed to come clean no matter what she used on it, and she was explaining this to it in a low voice, very reasonable, very patient, the way you might explain something to a person who is being difficult on purpose. She did not hear the small feet on the hallway tiles. She did not notice the doorway darken. She felt the weight, a small, warm pressure against her back. She felt it press in, not hard, not grasping, just present, the way a tired person leans against a wall. She did not turn around. She did not make a sound. She kept scrubbing. "This tile," she said quietly to nobody and everybody, "thinks it is better than me." The small weight against her back shifted slightly, settled. Rosa kept working. She moved left along the cabinet and the weight stayed with her, adjusting, following without being asked. She scrubbed, she muttered, she moved. 20 minutes passed. When she finally sat back on her heels and turned around, the child was asleep. Cheek pressed to the cabinet door, one hand open on the tile beside her, breathing the deep, even breath of a person who had decided, for reasons that had nothing to do with logic, that this was a safe place to stop. Rosa looked at her for a long moment. She did not wake her, she did not touch her. She gathered her supplies, stood up very slowly so her knees would not pop, and finished the rest of the kitchen floor around the sleeping child, careful not to disturb her. She left before 6:30, she told no one. She did not think too much about it on the train home. She thought about the cabinet tile and whether a different product would help and what she was going to eat for breakfast. She did not know that she had just done something that 7 trained professionals had failed to do. She had simply not needed anything from the child. And the child, who was exhausted from needing to protect herself from everyone who needed something from her, had felt that and put her cheek against the cabinet door and slept. It was not magic. It was just the right kind of nothing. Back in the estate, 2 floors up, the morning passed normally. Owen arrived at 7 to find Sierra still asleep on the kitchen floor. He stood in the doorway for a moment, confused, because she had not slept past 5:30 in weeks. He got a blanket from the linen closet and spread it over her without waking her, and he stood there a moment longer, looking at the clean tile around her, still faintly damp. He looked at the cabinet, he looked at the floor. He went to check the security system's interior cameras. He pulled up the kitchen feed from 5:47 to 6:29. He watched the whole thing once. He watched it again. Then he sat back in his chair and thought for a very long time about what he had just seen. Outside, the city was fully awake now, loud and indifferent. Inside the estate, a 2-year-old girl slept on a kitchen floor wrapped in a blanket, peaceful for the first time in longer than anyone could measure, because a young woman had talked to a tile and not asked her for anything at all. Owen picked up his phone. He did not call the nanny agency. He called the cleaning company. He asked for the name of the woman assigned to the East Wing morning shift. Rosa, the dispatcher said, Rosa Vittl. Owen wrote it down. He looked at the name for a moment. Then he walked upstairs to knock on Dante Castellano's office door. He did not entirely know what he was going to say. He only knew that in 20 years of solving problems for this family, he had never seen a solution arrive the way this one had. Quietly, on its knees, talking to Grout. He knocked. "Come in," said Dante. Owen came in. He stood in front of the desk and said, "I think I found someone." Dante looked up from his papers. His face said nothing. It rarely did. "Tell me," he said. Owen told him. There was a long silence when he finished. Dante looked at the window, at the city beyond it, gray and cold this time of year, at some middle distance that Owen could not see. "Set up the camera review for me," Dante said finally. "I already have," said Owen. Dante stood. He straightened his jacket. He was a man who had looked at a great many difficult things in his life without flinching, but Owen noticed, as they walked to the security room, that his hands were very still at his sides, the way hands go still when a person is being careful. They sat down in front of the monitor. Dante watched the feed from 5:47. He did not say a word for the entire 42 minutes. When it ended, he sat quietly for a moment, Then he said, "Play it again." Owen played it again. Dante watched the second time with his elbows on the table and his hands folded in front of his mouth, and Owen could not read his face, which was not unusual, but there was something in his eyes that Owen recognized from only a handful of moments in 20 years. Something that looked, very briefly, like a man who did not know what to do. "I want to speak with her," Dante said. "I expected you would," said Owen. "Tomorrow morning, before her shift ends." Owen nodded. Dante stood. He looked at the frozen frame on the monitor. Sierra asleep, Rosa already gone, the clean, quiet kitchen. "She didn't even look at her," Dante said. "Not a criticism, something else." "No," Owen agreed, "she didn't." Dante was quiet for another moment. Then he walked out of the security room without another word, and Owen stayed behind and looked at the frozen frame a little longer. He thought about what it must feel like to be 2 years old, and to have had everyone in your world look at you with that specific mix of worry and hope and expectation, every single day, for 8 months. To have every adult in your life need you to be okay, need you to respond, need you to show them that what they were doing was working. He thought about what it must feel like to find, in the middle of a cold kitchen before sunrise, one person who looked at the floor instead of you. He turned off the monitor. Tomorrow then. Tomorrow everything in this house would begin to shift. None of them knew it yet. Rosa Vittle was on a train heading home, thinking about breakfast. Sierra was asleep upstairs, her cheek warm, her breathing even. Dante Castellano was behind his office door again, doing whatever Dante Castellano did behind closed doors. And Owen Price stood in the security room in his formal suit and thought, "In 20 years, I have never seen anything like that." He was not wrong. Rosa was not nervous when they told her the owner of the estate wanted to speak with her. She probably should have been. Everyone who worked for agencies like hers understood, in a general way, that the people whose floors they cleaned were powerful. The kind of powerful that did not need to explain itself. The estate alone told you that, the size of it, the quiet of it, the way every surface was maintained to a standard that had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with control. But Rosa had grown up around people who used silence and sighs to make you feel small, and she had decided a long time ago that she did not have time for that. Not because she was brave, exactly. More because she was practical. Fear cost energy she did not have to spare. She arrived the next morning at her usual time, 4:45. Cold outside, the kind of cold that came with a wet wind off the river. She signed in at the service entrance the way she always did, nodded to the overnight guard the way she always did, and went to collect her supplies from the cleaning closet. Owen Price was waiting for her in the hallway. She looked at him. He was a tall man, older, with the bearing of someone who had spent decades being in charge of things. He looked tired, she noticed. The kind of tired that came from a problem that would not stay solved. "Mr. Castellano would like to speak with you before you leave this morning," Owen said. Rosa looked at him steadily. "What did I break?" "Nothing," Owen said. He saw the security footage from yesterday morning. She understood then. The child, the kitchen floor. She nodded once. "All right," she said, and she went to start her shift. She cleaned the east wing. She worked through the kitchen and the long corridor and the dining room, and she did what she always did, which was focus on the work in front of her and not borrow trouble from hours that had not arrived yet. At 6:15, Owen came to find her. He led her through parts of the house she had never been in. Up a wide staircase, down a hallway lined with nothing on the walls, no paintings, no photographs, just clean painted surfaces and closed doors. She noticed that. No photographs. In a house this size, that was a choice, not an oversight. The office was at the end of the hall. Owen knocked, opened the door, stepped aside. Rosa walked in. The man behind the desk looked up. She had a brief, clear impression of him before her practical brain took over and started cataloging the room for information. 40, maybe a little older, dark-haired, starting to go gray at the sides, suited even at this hour. The kind of man who had probably never in his life looked uncertain, and who was currently working very hard to make sure that remained true. He was looking at her, the way people looked at things they could not categorize. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He looked at her for a moment. She looked back. Neither of them reached for small talk. "You found my daughter on the kitchen floor yesterday morning," he said. "She found me," Rosa said. A small pause. "What did you do?" "I kept cleaning." He was quiet for a moment. "That is all." "I talked to the tile a little," Rosa said. "It was giving me trouble." Something moved across his face. She could not have named it. "I have had 7 caregivers in this house in 4 months," he said. "Every one of them trained, every one of them experienced. Not one of them could get Sierra to stop screaming, let alone sleep." He paused. "You are a cleaning contractor with no childcare training, and my daughter fell asleep against your back in 20 minutes. "I was not trying to do anything," Rosa said. "That is probably why." He studied her. "I would like to offer you a different position." She had expected this. She had thought about it on the train home the night before, sitting with her reflection in the dark window, turning it over. "I am a cleaner," she said, "not a nanny." "I am aware. I do not have any training." "I am aware of that too." "Then why?" He looked at her for a moment. Then he said something she did not expect from a man who looked like him, in a room like this. "Because I am out of other ideas," he said. It was such a plain thing to say, such an honest thing. From a man who looked like he had built his entire life around never saying anything like that out loud. She looked at him. He looked back. "I will think about it," she said. She stood. She thanked him, which seemed to surprise him slightly. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. "What is her name?" she asked. "Sierra," he said. Rosa nodded. She left. Owen was waiting in the hallway. He walked her back through the house to the service entrance. He did not ask what she had decided. She appreciated that. Outside, the cold hit her face. She started walking toward the bus stop. She thought about the small weight against her back, the way it had settled, the way it had trusted without deciding to trust. She thought about the man in that office. The plain, careful way he had said he was out of ideas, the photographs missing from the walls. She thought about the child sleeping on the kitchen floor, cheek pressed to the cabinet door. By the time she reached the bus stop, she had decided. She did not call Owen that day. She called the next morning before her shift. "I will do it," she said, "but I am doing it my way." There was a pause. Then Owen said, "I will let him know." "He will agree?" she asked. Another pause, shorter. "Yes," Owen said, "he will agree." She hung up and stood in the cold outside her building for a moment, breathing. She had just agreed to go live in a house that belonged to a man whose walls held no photographs, and whose daughter had not slept properly in 8 months. She was not afraid. She was, if she was being honest with herself, a little bit curious. That more than anything else was probably the most important thing she had brought with her into that kitchen. Not training, not gentleness, not even patience. Curiosity about the tile, about the work, about whatever was in front of her. And a child who had stopped trusting everyone who came through her door had felt it, somehow, through the back of a woman who was not paying her any attention at all. She picked up her bag and went inside to pack. She did not know yet what she was walking into. She would find out soon enough. They all would. The morning Rosa Vittle moved into the Castellano estate. She brought 1 suitcase, a cloth bag with her cleaning supplies, and a small plant in a terracotta pot that had lived on her kitchen windowsill for 3 years. Owen Price looked at the plant, Then he looked at her. Then he showed her to her room without a word about it. The room was nicer than anywhere she had ever lived. That was simply a fact. It had a window that looked out over the garden, a bed with a proper headboard, a bathroom to herself, and a small desk by the window. Someone had put fresh flowers on the desk in a glass vase. She looked at those for a moment, then set her plan on the windowsill next to them and stepped back. Better. Owen handed her a schedule. Sierra woke between 5:30 and 6. Breakfast at 7. The child had no firm routine beyond that, he explained, because every nanny had handled things differently, and none of them had been around long enough to establish anything consistent. What is she like? Rosa asked. Owen opened his mouth, closed it. She likes blocks, he said finally, the wooden ones, and she used to like being read to before. He paused. She does not let anyone read to her now. Rosa nodded. She folded the schedule and put it in her pocket. Where is Mr. Castellano? She asked. His office, 3rd floor. He leaves for meetings at 8 and is generally back by 7 in the evening. Owen paused. He does not involve himself in the daily routine. He has not been able to help her, Rosa said. It was not a question. Owen looked at her steadily. He does not know how, he said, and she could tell from the careful way he said it that this was not a criticism. It was just the truth, and the truth was heavy. She thanked him and went to find Sierra. The child's room was at the end of the upper corridor. The door was open. A young woman from the household staff, a girl named Pippa who had been taking overnight shifts since the last nanny left, was sitting on the floor near the door looking exhausted. She stood when she saw Rosa. She just woke up, Pippa said. She is in the corner she does not like to be. Thank you, Rosa said. You can go. Pippa hesitated. Go sleep, Rosa said. You look like you need it. Pippa went. Rosa stood in the doorway. Sierra was in the corner of the room, behind a small bookshelf, sitting with her knees pulled up and her back to the wall. She was not screaming. She was watching the door with the dark, careful eyes of a child who had learned to assess every arrival. Rosa looked at her. Sierra looked at Rosa. Rosa looked at the room. She noted the toys on the shelves, all neatly arranged, none of them touched recently from the look of it. She noted the books, stacked spine out. She noted the small table in the center of the room with 2 child-sized chairs. She noted the morning light coming in through the curtain gap. Then she went and sat down in one of the child-sized chairs. It was too small for her. She sat in it anyway. She looked out the window. She did not look at Sierra. From the corner, she could feel the child watching her. She said nothing. She did nothing. She sat in the too small chair and looked at the garden below and thought about what she needed to do later in the afternoon and whether she had packed the right shoes for winter. 4 minutes passed. 5. 7. She heard a small shuffle from the corner. She kept looking at the window. The shuffle came again, closer. A small hand appeared on the edge of the table beside her. Then a small face appeared at the table's edge, watching her from below, eyes level with the tabletop. Rosa glanced down, just briefly. Morning, she said. Sierra stared at her. Rosa looked back out the window. Another minute passed. Then Sierra climbed into the other small chair. It fit her much better. She sat and looked at the window too for a while. Then she reached across the table and put her hand on Rosa's arm. Rosa did not make a sound. She did not look down. She did not react in any of the ways that adults reacted to moments like this, the sharp intake of breath, the sentimental smile, the cooing praise that children like Sierra had learned to distrust. She just let the hand be there. After a while she said, "Hungry." Sierra did not say anything, but she got down from the chair. Rosa got down from hers. Her back ached from sitting in something built for a person a quarter her size. She stretched once, quietly, and walked to the door. She looked back. Sierra was following her. They went to the kitchen together. Rosa did not carry her, did not take her hand. Sierra walked beside her, slightly behind, close enough that her shoulder almost brushed Rosa's leg. Rosa made oatmeal. She made enough for two. She put Sierra's in a bowl with a small spoon and set it on the low table in the kitchen corner without ceremony. She sat at the regular table with her own bowl and ate. Sierra climbed into her chair and ate. It was the first full breakfast Sierra had eaten in 6 weeks. Pippa told Owen. Owen told no one else. But Rosa noticed, when she passed Dante's office door at 8:15 on her way to get Sierra's coat, that the door was open a narrow crack, and she had the distinct, quiet feeling that someone on the other side of it had been standing there for a little while. She did not stop, she did not look. She got the coat. She and Sierra went outside to the garden. The days settled into a shape. Not a schedule exactly, more like a terrain that they both learned together. Sierra woke between 5:30 and 6 and went to find Rosa, because Rosa was always awake before she was, sitting at the kitchen table with tea, doing nothing in particular, available in the way that a person is available when they are simply present and not waiting for something to happen. They ate breakfast. They went outside when the weather allowed. They came back. Rosa did light cleaning during the hours Sierra napped, old habit, and Sierra had taken to napping reliably now, which was something Owen noted in the household log with quiet disbelief. Rosa did not run enrichment activities. She did not use any of the developmental toys the child psychologist had recommended. She did not attempt structured play or emotional processing exercises. She built things. She fixed things. She cooked. And Sierra watched or helped badly or wandered off and came back, and Rosa let all of that happen without making it mean anything. One afternoon, about 2 weeks in, Rosa was sitting on the kitchen floor again, the same spot as that first morning, because there was a sticky patch near the cabinet she had never quite resolved. Sierra sat beside her this time, not behind her. She handed Rosa the cloth when Rosa reached for it. Then she reached for the cabinet and pushed her small palm against it, very seriously, as if she was helping. "Good," Rosa said. Sierra pushed harder. "Yes," Rosa said, "you got it." Sierra looked deeply satisfied. It was around this time that Dante began to come home earlier. Not dramatically earlier, 20 minutes, half an hour. But Owen noticed because Owen noticed everything, and he mentioned it to nobody, because some things were better left in the category of facts that existed without being discussed. Dante did not interact with Rosa, not directly. He was in his office. She was in the kitchen or the garden or wherever Sierra had led her that day. Their paths did not cross in any significant way, and both of them appeared to prefer it that way. But the house was different. Owen had been in this house long enough to understand that a house held the mood of the people in it. For 8 months, the mood had been a held breath. Something waiting to go wrong. The particular tension of a man who controlled everything and could fix nothing. Now the held breath had changed. It was still there, but it was something else, not quite release. More like the first moment after a long silence when you start to think maybe it will be all right. Maybe not certainly, but maybe. That was the week Sierra spoke her first word since her mother died. It was not a word anyone would have predicted. They were in the garden. Rosa was looking at a section of the path where the stones were uneven and thinking about whether she should tell Owen to have someone look at it. Sierra was crouching near the flower bed, looking at something on the ground. "Bug," Sierra said. Rosa looked over. "Yes," Rosa said, "bug." Sierra looked up at her. Then she looked back at the bug. "Bug," she said again, more quietly, like she was confirming something to herself. Rosa did not call anyone, did not make a fuss. She crouched next to Sierra and looked at the bug with her, and the two of them stayed there for a while, both looking at it, until the bug went under a stone and disappeared. Owen found out from Pippa, who had been watching from the kitchen window. He went upstairs. He knocked on Dante's office door. He went in. He stood in front of the desk and said, "She talked today." Dante looked up from his papers. Owen told him what the word was. Dante looked down at his desk for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you, Owen." Owen went out and closed the door. He stood in the hallway and gave Dante 1 minute. Then he went back to his work. 3 days later, Dante came down to the kitchen in the evening. It was unusual. He was not a man who came to the kitchen. He had meals brought to him or ate in the formal dining room when there was company. He stood in the doorway in his jacket, not yet having changed for the evening, and looked at the scene in front of him. Sierra was on the floor. Rosa was at the table with a cup of something. Sierra had a wooden spoon and a pot lid and was clanging them together with enormous concentration, as if she was solving a problem that required this specific sound. The noise was extraordinary. Rosa was drinking her tea without appearing to notice. Dante stood in the doorway. Rosa looked up. She saw him. She did not look startled. "She is composing," Rosa said over the clanging. "Give her a minute." Dante looked at his daughter on the floor. Sierra had not noticed him yet. She was too focused. The clanging reached some kind of crescendo and then stopped, and Sierra looked at the pot lid with the expression of an artist who has just finished something they are not entirely sure about. Then she looked up. She saw him. For a moment, everything in the kitchen was very still. Then Sierra held the pot lid out toward him. It was not the kind of thing you could plan for. It was not the kind of thing you could have arranged or practiced or made happen through any amount of money or intention. It just happened. His daughter, who had been unreachable for 8 months, held out a pot lid and looked at him. Dante walked across the kitchen. He crouched down. He took the pot lid from her with both hands. Sierra looked at it in his hands. She seemed to find this acceptable. Rosa looked at her tea. The kitchen was very quiet. Dante held the pot lid and looked at his daughter and did not say a word, and the quiet in the kitchen was not the held breath kind anymore. It was a different kind entirely. The kind that comes after something has broken through and the air on the other side of it is clear. Rosa finished her tea. She set the cup down. She said she will need dinner in about 20 minutes. She stood and went to the refrigerator and began pulling things out, and Dante stayed on the floor of his own kitchen holding a pot lid, and Sierra reached up and patted his knee once, firmly, and then went back to the wooden spoon. Owen, had he been there, would have found it remarkable. Rosa found it entirely ordinary. That was, of course, the whole point. The fever came on a Wednesday. Rosa noticed it in the afternoon. She noticed everything about Sierra's patterns by now, the particular way the child moved when she was tired, the way she held herself when something was wrong, the small signals that existed below the level of words. Sierra had been quiet all day, not the good kind of quiet, and she had eaten almost nothing at lunch, which was unlike her. Rosa put her hand on the back of Sierra's neck, warm. She told Owen. Owen called the doctor. The doctor came, examined Sierra, said it was a standard fever, nothing alarming, keep her hydrated and comfortable, it should break in a day or two. By midnight the fever had climbed. Sierra was not screaming. She was past that now, past the worst of what those first months had built in her. But she was restless, moving in her bed, kicking off her blankets and then wanting them back, and Rosa sat on the floor beside the bed and watched and waited and was simply there. She had pushed the small armchair to the edge of the bed so she could rest her arm on the mattress. But she stayed on the floor because being on the floor beside someone was different from being above them, more like being alongside, less like watching. Sierra had her hand hanging off the edge of the mattress. At some point, her fingers found Rosa's knee and rested there, and Rosa did not move. She was not sure what time it was when she heard the footsteps in the hallway. She recognized them. She had learned the sounds of this house in the months she had been here, the creak of the third stair, the way the heating pipes ticked, the particular weight of Dante's step in the corridor. He stopped outside the door. She could see him in the hallway light. He had not changed from his clothes, so he had been up, or he had come from somewhere else. He was standing in the doorway with his hand on the frame, and he was looking at his daughter. Then he looked at Rosa. She looked back. She did not say anything, neither did he. He went away. She thought that was the end of it. She settled back, adjusted her position on the floor, checked Sierra's forehead. 15 minutes later, she heard the footsteps again. He came to the doorway a second time. He was carrying 2 cups. He looked at them as if he was not entirely sure how they had ended up in his hands. He held one out across the threshold. Rosa looked at it. It was tea, very dark, probably too strong, the kind of tea made by someone who was guessing. She took it. She wrapped both hands around it because the house was cold at this hour. He sat down on the floor in the hallway, just outside the door. She sat on the floor inside the room. Between them the doorway, Sierra's hand on Rosa's knee, warm with fever. Neither of them spoke. It occurred to Rosa that this man had been trying to fix this for 8 months. He had tried money and expertise and authority and distance, and every combination of those things he knew how to arrange. He had built his life on the certainty that everything could be solved if you had the right leverage and the right people. And then his wife had died and his daughter had stopped trusting the world, and not one thing he knew how to do had touched it. And he had hired her. Not because she had a solution, because she was the last option. She drank the tea. It was too strong, but it was hot, and the night was cold, and it was exactly what someone might make at midnight when they did not know how to do anything else useful and needed to do something. She ate today, he said quietly. Not much, Rosa said, more than yesterday. He nodded. She said 4 words at breakfast, Rosa said. Juice, cup, Rosa, no. Something shifted in his expression. He had not known this. She could tell. She said your name, he said. She says it a lot now, Rosa said. It was the second word after bug. She paused. She will talk more when she is feeling better. She has been practicing. He was quiet for a while. How do you know when she is practicing? He said. Rosa thought about how to explain it. She says a word very quietly first, she said. To herself, like she is checking that it works. Then if it does, she says it again a little louder. He was very still. She did that with your name too, Rosa said. Before she said it to you directly, she practiced it for 2 days. He looked at the floor of the hallway. His hands were around his cup. Rosa heard Sierra's breathing shift. She checked her forehead, a little cooler. Maybe, she was not sure. She is going to be all right, Rosa said, not the fever. She meant the other thing, the thing neither of them had named. She is not the same child she was when I arrived. She is already not the same. He did not respond. She misses her mother, Rosa said. She will always miss her, but she is learning that she can still trust people. A pause. That is not a small thing. He looked up from the floor. She was not looking at him. She was looking at Sierra. How did you know, he said, what to do? I did not know, Rosa said simply. I just did not try to do anything. I think that is what she needed, someone who was not trying. Another long silence. I have been trying for 8 months, he said. I know, Rosa said. It did not work. No, she agreed, not unkindly. He was quiet for so long she thought he had run out of things to say. She understood. She was not a person who had difficulty with silence. Then he said very quietly, I did not know how to help her after her mother. A pause. I still do not know how to help her. I am her father and I do not know how. Rosa thought about that. You came at midnight, she said finally. He looked at her. When she was sick, Rosa said. You came, you did not know what to do, so you made tea, badly, A pause. That is not nothing. He looked at the cup in his hands. She knows you come, Rosa said. She knows you are here. Children know these things even when they cannot say them. The hallway was very quiet. Somewhere in the house the heating ticked. You should go to sleep, Rosa said. I will come and get you if anything changes. He did not move immediately. He sat with his cup for another moment. Then he said, "Thank you." She glanced at him. He was not looking at her. He was looking at Sira. She is the one doing the work, Rosa said. He stood. He took his cup. He stood in the doorway for one more moment, looking at his daughter. Then he said, quietly, to no one in particular, "She looks like her mother when she sleeps." Rosa did not say anything. He went. She sat in the dark with Sira's hand on her knee, and the empty doorway in front of her, and the cup of bad tea still warm in her hands. The fever broke an hour later. Sira sighed in her sleep, long and deep, and her skin cooled under Rosa's palm, and Rosa closed her eyes for a moment and let herself be tired. When she opened them, the sky outside the window was beginning to lighten. She sat there until Sira woke up, which was not long after. The first thing Sira did when she woke was look for Rosa. The second thing she did was look at the doorway, as if she expected someone to be there. Rosa noticed. She said nothing about it. She helped Sira sit up and drink some water, and she checked her temperature and said, "Better," and Sira said, "Better," back to her, practicing. An hour later, Dante appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was dressed. He had his coffee. He looked at Sira, who was eating small pieces of toast at the low table. Sira looked up at him. He walked over and crouched beside her table. He looked at the toast. He said, "Are you feeling better?" Sira looked at him for a moment. "Better," she said. He stayed where he was for a moment, not speaking, just crouching beside his daughter's small table. Then he reached out and very carefully pushed a piece of toast back onto her plate that had been about to fall off the edge. Sira watched him do this. Then she picked up another piece of toast and held it out to him. He took it. Rosa was at the stove. Her back was to both of them. She was making oatmeal and not watching, and the kitchen was full of the warm, ordinary smell of breakfast. And outside the window the garden was gray and damp, and the day was beginning. She did not turn around. She stirred the oatmeal and listened to the silence behind her, which was not the empty kind, and thought about the particular shape of mornings when something has shifted and nobody has said so yet. There were more mornings after that. There always are after the ones that matter. Sira's vocabulary doubled that month, then doubled again. She developed strong opinions about which cup was hers, and which blanket she preferred, and whether toast should be cut into triangles or squares, and she expressed these opinions clearly and sometimes loudly, and Rosa listened to all of it with the same steady attention she had given the sticky tile on that first morning. Dante ate breakfast in the kitchen twice that week, then 3 times. He sat at the regular table with his coffee and his papers, and Sira ate her toast, and Rosa made oatmeal, and nobody made a speech about any of it. Owen Price updated the household log. He did not write anything sentimental. He was not that kind of man. He simply noted in his careful handwriting that the situation had stabilized. He underlined it once. Then he closed the log and put it away and went to manage the next thing that needed managing, which was what he always did. But he paused at the kitchen doorway on his way past, just briefly, and looked at the 3 of them in the warm morning room. He thought, in 20 years, I have never seen anything like this. He was still not wrong. The impossible thing had happened. Not because Rosa Vittel had tried to do it. Because she had walked into a house full of people trying very hard, and she had simply refused to join them. She had cleaned the floor, she had talked to the tile. She had made 2 strong tea at midnight and said, without saying it, that being present was enough, that showing up was enough, that you did not have to know how to fix a broken thing to sit beside it in the dark and wait. Sierra had felt that, in the wordless, knowing way of small children who have been hurt and are deciding, slowly, whether to risk trusting again. She had felt it in the kitchen before sunrise. She had felt it in the too small chair by the window. She had felt it every morning after in the unremarkable fact of Rosa being there. And somewhere in this house, a man who had built everything he owned on the certainty that every problem had a solution had discovered, at midnight, in a hallway, with a badly made cup of tea in his hands, that some things did not get solved. They got sat beside. And that, it turned out, was the only thing that had ever worked.